Hello my friends and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. I made a video on this Mozart group, which is the alternative of the Wagner group. So Mozart Group is an American private military contractor, and Wagner Group is a mercenary organization designated by the European Union and United States of America. I'm talking about Wagner Group as a something terrorist organization, something like that, which is a bad thing in both ways. Bad thing for Wagner, bad thing that it was designated. So in this case we have the alternative, which supposed to be the good guys, which is the alternative to Wagner, Mozart. Next one is going to be Brahms or something, or Liszt, who knows. In this case we just have an article from the New York Times. And New York Times, unbelievably, comes out with an article that would tell us about Mozart. Basically, it's just burying Mozart again. So let's see what's going on here. At the beginning, Mozart was hailed as the alternative to the evil Wagnerites. Now we have them gone. This article comes from the New York Times on February 2nd, 2023. Hard drinking and murky finances. How an American veterans group imploded in Ukraine. So, Andrew Milburn. The problem is, you have to understand this. Andrew made some comments on, I think he was on a podcast, or you can hear his voice, you can hear him saying what he says, and those comments that he made were not the best comments. You know, when you refer to Zelensky, you're kind of supposed to call him almost as a deity, and nothing wrong with that guy. As Americans would say, his shit doesn't stink. So the same here. This guy kind of said the opposite, and I think he had some beverages, adult beverages, and then he let things loose. Let's put it as, he got too relaxed, I guess, and he said certain things that were not good for the Ukrainian leadership and for the image that these guys were created for the Mozart group. So you attack the angel, then the devils are attacking you. So, Andrew Milburn, that's the guy, a former American Marine colonel and leader of the Mozart Group, stood in a chilly meeting room on the second floor of an apartment building in Kiev about to deliver some bad news. In front of him sat half of a dozen men who had traveled to Ukraine on their own dime to work for him. And I'm quoting, "Guys, I'm gutted," he said. "The Mozart Group is dead." The men stared back at him with blank faces. One asked as he walked towards the door, "What should I do with my helmet?" End quote. The Mozart Group, one of the most prominent private American military organizations in Ukraine, has collapsed under a cloud of accusations ranging from financial improprieties to alcohol-addled misjudgments. Its struggles provide a revealing window into the world of foreign volunteer groups that have flocked to Ukraine with noble intentions, only to be tripped up by the stress of managing a complicated enterprise in a war zone. These are not bad people who make these kind of articles. They use good terms, good terms to form an opinion, obviously. And I'm quoting, "I've seen this happen many times," end quote, said one of the Mozart veteran trainers, who, like many others, spoke only anonymously, out of concerns that the Russians might target him. And I'm quoting, "You got to run these groups like a business. We didn't do that," end quote. Hundreds, if not thousands, of foreign veterans and volunteers have passed through Ukraine. Many of them, like Milburn and his group, are hard-living men who have spent their adult lives steeped in violence, solo flyers trying to work together in a very dangerous environment without a lot of structure or rules. The Mozart Group thrived at first, training Ukrainian troops, rescuing civilians from the front line, and raising more than $1 million in donation to finance it all. But then the money began to run out. After months of struggling to hold it together, Mozart was plagued by defections, infighting, and break-in at its office headquarters, and a lawsuit filed by the company's chief financial officer, Andrew Bain, seeking the ouster of Milburn. The lawsuit filed in Wyoming, where Mozart is registered as a limited liability company, is a litany of petty and serious allegations accusing Milburn, among other things, of making derogatory comments about Ukraine's leadership. We are straight. This guy went straight to the neck. They didn't, pretend or fainted or something. No, straight there. So among other things that they don't really care now, they just go straight to the most important offense here. Making derogatory comments about Ukraine's leadership while, and I'm quoting, significantly intoxicated, that's when people tell the truth and also make up stories. Letting his dog urinate in a borrowed apartment, and I'm quoting, diverting company funds and other financial malfeasance. Now, they're attacking now his little character that he's got with all that, leaving his dog to pee over there, to do this. Anyway, so I'm quoting Mr. Milburn. I'll be the first to admit that I'm flawed, okay? Who acknowledged in an interview that he had been drinking when he made the comments on Ukraine, end quote. And I'm starting to quote right now. We all are, end quote, but he denied the more serious allegations about financial improprieties, calling them utterly ridiculous. So when Milburn showed up in Ukraine in early March last year, the capital Kiev was seemingly on the precipice. Russian forces were blasting their way in front of the suburbs of Ukraine and was rushing thousands of inexperienced soldiers to the front. Well, then they make a little, Milburn is 59, met the other guy, Bain, who's 58, also a former Marine colonel. And they are talking about, forming a little organization, and they did. The two founded Mozart, the name of saucy response to the Russian mercenary force that used the name of another famous composer, the Wagner Group. They also ran a short-lived podcast called Two Marines in Kiev. Okay, so they tried this thing. Good. So they got together and they were friendly, and then obviously they want money. Well, it seems like on top of that, the people Mozart hired were not the easiest to manage. Many were grizzled combat vets who admitted to struggling with PTSD and heavy drinking. When they weren't working, they gravitated to Kiev strip clubs, bars, and online dating. These are the guys. Well, obviously, this makes a hit on the Mozart Group, the New York Times. They don't do anything right. They did a little bit at the beginning, but that's it. And I'm quoting, there was a lot of cursing, a lot of womanizing, a lot of things you wouldn't want to take to mass, said another trainer. Now, Bain, who owned 51% of the company, then approached Milburn, who held the other 49%, about separating. Both men said in interviews. Bain asked Milburn to pay $5 million to buy him out. Money. But Milburn refused, saying there was no way he could come up with such a sum. The two soon stopped talking. And in September, they lost an important funding stream when a charity called Allied Extract decided to use less expensive Ukrainian teams to rescue civilians. By November, Mozart was so short of cash that Milburn, Bain, and another guy gave up their salaries of several $100s a day. Several $100s a day. Well, they tried, right? They tried, and then no longer. They say here that when a security guard refused to let them in, one of Milburn's men pinned him against the wall while Milburn kicked down the door. So no longer after that, a clip of Milburn disparaging Ukraine's leadership circulated widely on social media. And I'm quoting, "I happen to have a Ukrainian flag tied to my bag, but I'm not. Oh my God, Ukraine is so awesome," he said. "I understand that," I'm quoting this guy, "that there are plenty of screwed up people running Ukraine," end quote. Oh my God, that's a no-no. The clip was taken from the Team House podcast, in which guests are invited into the living room setting to drink hard liquor with a host. And I'm quoting, "Of course, I shouldn't have said that," Milburn acknowledged. Because this is what happened to you, or because they caught you, because why, you didn't believe in it? Yeah. So this is, and then they got in a lawsuit, Bain and Milburn. And this is what these guys are doing in the Mozart Group. I understand to a certain extent certain kind of behavior in those kind of in that kind of environment, but it should be a balance. And if the balance is obviously damaged, then you're not a fighter. When you're a fighter, well, you have to be very disciplined, because if you're not disciplined, you lose your life, obviously, most likely. So you have to be very organized, very disciplined, very exact. You have to have imagination as well, courage, that's the first one. But it doesn't mean that after you are finishing your, I don't know, Call of Duty or whatever you do over there, you shouldn't get engaged in those kind of activities. As low as they are, maybe for a lot of people, not maybe, certainly, for a lot of people, those are ways to cope with what they experience out there. And as I said, I don't condone their behavior outside of, I mean, I'm not in their shoes, but I'm just saying that it's just, I understand when I see people acting like that outside of, I say normality or civility, but on the other hand, a lot of people have a lot of problems. We have a lot of problems, and we try to cope with them as good as we can, and we make a lot of mistakes. Now these guys, Milburn and Baud or Bait or whatever his name is, it seems to me that possibly at the beginning they were, pushed by ideal, thoughts and feelings to go over there in Ukraine and help. But sometimes things don't go the way you want it, and you adjust, or maybe you hit a certain kind of point where I don't want to say lose yourself, I would say you find yourself, which you realize who the hell you exactly are, because you don't have any constraints anymore. When you don't have any more constraints, you act as you are with no constraints. That's you. All this posture of civilization and this is because we still have rules and punishments attached to those rules if they're violated. But once you get in a power where you're unchecked, that's why people say, "Oh, he was always a tyrant." Maybe he wasn't. He got in power. He became, omnipowerful. He just became himself. He just let everything out. Like many of us probably would do the same thing if let over there. That's why I remember, I'm just using this just to, make a point, not because I'm a follower or anything like that. I'm talking about, let's make it beautiful, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. When he said, he advised his African American community or black community to not criticize the other people this harshly, because they don't know how they would have reacted if the roles would have been reversed. Well, nowadays you can't say that because obviously, but I think he's right. We can point fingers and so on, and just sit on a high horse and but you don't know how you're gonna react in those kind of situations. You can guess when everything is nice. So same with the Wagner group, and the Wagner and the Mozart. Wagner is a different story, but more different. I'm talking about Mozart here. And Mozart, this guy made some mistakes, and I think one of the big mistakes that he made is that interview. That interview, I think, damaged forever his ability to show himself in public and redeem himself. Certain things cannot be said. Certain things, if you said them, New York Times is going to make a piece on you. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.